Have you ever stared at the ceiling in the dead of night, desperately praying for guidance, only to feel like your words are evaporating into empty space? What if I told you that the most profound spiritual command in history, "Let there be light," has been completely misunderstood for centuries, and this misinterpretation might be the very reason your prayers feel hollow? When we think of those four powerful words, we typically imagine the physical separation of darkness and illumination. But what if the Creator wasn't talking about physical light at all? What if those words contain a spiritual principle so transformative that once you truly grasp it, everything in your life will fundamentally change? Has this ever happened to you? You've faced a seemingly insurmountable problem, and in your desperation, you've looked upward, asking for divine intervention. You've pleaded, bargained, and promised, yet nothing changed. The heavens remained silent. Your prayers seem to hit an invisible ceiling and bounce right back to you. If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. For decades, spiritual teacher Joel Goldsmith dedicated his life to helping people understand what "let there be light" truly means. He discovered something revolutionary, something that challenges everything most of us have been taught about spirituality and prayer. The profound truth is that we've been seeking light from outside ourselves, believing we exist in darkness, when in reality, the divine light already exists within us. This misunderstanding has led millions of spiritual seekers on an endless wild goose chase, looking externally for what has always been internal. Think about it. If you're constantly asking something outside yourself to illuminate your path, aren't you affirming your own darkness? This fundamental misperception is precisely why so many spiritual journeys feel difficult and produce no real transformation. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize your understanding of spirituality. The secret doesn't lie in perfecting your prayer technique or finding the right words to convince God to help you. It lies in a profound shift in consciousness, recognizing that you are not separate from the light you seek. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Imagine for a moment what would change if you stopped seeing yourself as a being in darkness, occasionally visited by divine light, and instead recognized yourself as a being of light, temporarily forgetting your true nature. This isn't just semantic wordplay. It's a complete inversion of how most of us approach our relationship with the divine. What you're about to discover through Joel Goldsmith's profound teachings might surprise you, challenge you, and ultimately transform you. We're going to explore why this understanding changes everything, from how you pray to how you face challenges, from how you see yourself to how you perceive the very nature of reality. Now, let's dive into what might be the most important spiritual principle you'll ever encounter. A principle that has remained hidden in plain sight for centuries, waiting for you to discover its transformative power. The profound revelation that Joel Goldsmith brings us is this: true spiritual illumination isn't about creating light where there was darkness. It's about recognizing the divine light that has always existed within you. Think about what this actually means for your spiritual journey. You're not waiting for some external deity to decide you're worthy of illumination. You're simply opening your awareness to what has always been present in your consciousness. This hidden truth completely transforms the foundation of spiritual growth. Most of us have been taught to pursue enlightenment as if it was something we lack, something we must attain through years of discipline, prayer, or meditation. But this mindset of pursuit actually reinforces the very sense of separation it claims to overcome. When I first encountered this teaching, it felt like someone had turned my spiritual world upside down. All those years of seeking, of feeling somehow incomplete or unworthy, dissolved in the face of this simple revelation. The light is already here. It always has been. The only darkness was my own unawareness of this fact. This isn't just a theoretical concept. It's a complete paradigm shift that impacts every aspect of your relationship with the divine. You stop being a beggar, knocking at heaven's door, and become a conscious vessel of infinite light. The transformation is from seeker to receiver, from petitioner to participant in divine reality. Joel Goldsmith's profound insight was that the kingdom of light exists within you, not somewhere in the distant heavens. This perfectly aligns with Jesus' teaching that the kingdom of God is within you, a statement that has been largely misunderstood throughout history. It's not about a future paradise or a distant realm. It's about the divine consciousness that constitutes your true nature right now, in this very moment. The journey from darkness to light isn't about traveling somewhere else or becoming someone different. It's about awakening to who you already are. When your consciousness is properly aligned with this truth, divine light flows naturally through every aspect of your being and experience. Problems don't disappear through divine intervention. They dissolve when seen in the light of spiritual reality. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens in your daily life when you truly embody this understanding. Because while intellectual comprehension is valuable, the real power comes from allowing this revelation to permeate your consciousness and transform how you navigate challenges, make decisions, and experience your relationship with the world around you. If these spiritual insights have touched something deep within you, hit subscribe to join our community of light seekers. Each video explores another facet of timeless wisdom that can transform your everyday experience. The mindset shift from "I need to find the light" to "I am a vehicle for light that already exists" completely revolutionizes your spiritual practice. Instead of desperately grasping for answers outside yourself, you learn to quiet the noise that prevents you from hearing the wisdom that's always speaking within. This is the beginning of true spiritual autonomy. If this perspective is shifting something fundamental in your understanding, write in the comments, "The light is already here." I'd love to know how this ancient teaching is resonating with you. In our modern world, this profound insight leads us to understand that everything you could ever need already exists within your own consciousness. The divine declaration, "Let there be light," wasn't just a cosmic event at the beginning of time. It's an invitation to an inner awakening that happens within you, a shift from seeing limitation to experiencing wholeness. Think about how most people navigate challenges in their daily lives. They operate from a consciousness of darkness, constantly, focusing on what's wrong, what's missing, what hurts. Have you noticed how dwelling on problems seems to make them grow larger, more insurmountable? This isn't just coincidence. When we fixate on lack, we're actually reinforcing and perpetuating the very frequency that created the problem in the first place. It's like trying to remove darkness by analyzing it, studying it, and fighting against it, all while ignoring the simple truth that darkness has no power in the presence of light. The more you wrestle with darkness, the more real it becomes in your experience. This mental blueprint becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that shapes your reality. The revelation that transformed Joel Goldsmith's understanding was that effective spiritual work doesn't begin by engaging with problems on their own level. Instead, it starts by rising above the problem into a higher state of consciousness where light already reveals the solution. This isn't positive thinking or wishful imagination. It's a fundamental shift in perspective that alters your relationship with reality itself. Imagine standing in brilliant sunlight while knowing that shadows have no real substance or power of their own. You don't hope or wish that shadows aren't real. You simply recognize their nature as temporary absences of light, not entities with their own existence. This certainty, this knowing, is the consciousness of true spiritual illumination. The mindset transformation here is subtle but revolutionary. Most spiritual seekers spend years trying to overcome darkness, not realizing that darkness doesn't need to be overcome. It needs to be understood for what it is, simply the absence of recognized light. When you stop fighting against what you don't want and start standing firmly in the truth of what already is, your journey takes on an entirely different quality. I've witnessed this principle at work countless times in my own life. When facing seemingly impossible situations, the breakthrough never came from analyzing the problem more deeply. It came in moments of clarity when I stepped back from the details and aligned with a higher perspective, the perspective where the light was already shining, revealing solutions I couldn't see when my consciousness was entangled with the problem. This journey of consciousness is perhaps the most profound hidden truth of spiritual development. We're not working to create something new or acquire something we lack. We're awakening to the light that has always been our true nature, letting it illuminate every corner of our experience. If you've ever had a moment where a persistent problem suddenly dissolved, not because circumstances changed, but because you saw it differently, type in the comments, "I've experienced this shift." Those moments of clarity are glimpses of what it means to rise from darkness into light consciousness. One of the most profound discoveries Joel made through his years of spiritual practice was that true illumination isn't something we actively pursue. It's something we receive through a form of deep listening. This insight completely reframes our spiritual journey from an active quest to a receptive posture. Think of it like this. When you enter a dark room and flip the light switch, you don't need to coax or convince the light to appear. You simply create the conditions that allow the already present electricity to flow through the circuit and illuminate the space. In the same way, spiritual illumination isn't about convincing divine intelligence to guide you. It's about becoming still enough to perceive the guidance that's already being offered. This subtle shift in mindset transforms our entire approach to spiritual growth. Rather than straining to hear a distant voice, we're clearing away the mental noise that prevents us from hearing what's already speaking. The revelation here is that divine illumination always precedes your awareness of darkness in spiritual reality. The light was already shining on your path before you even recognized you needed guidance. Behind the scenes of our spiritual struggles lies a fundamental misunderstanding about our relationship with the divine. The reason most spiritual practice ultimately fails is because people are seeking from what Joel called the separated self. This is the ego consciousness that believes it is somehow cut off from God's light and must now convince a reluctant deity to illuminate its path. The breakthrough moment comes when you recognize that this consciousness of separation cannot possibly receive divine illumination because it's founded on the fundamental lie of separation itself. God's light is not separate from you, temporarily hidden until you discover the right technique, prayer, or meditation practice. The light is your very nature, your true identity. This revelation exposes the futility of approaching spirituality as a transaction between separate entities. You here, God there, with some kind of negotiation needed to bridge the gap. Joel taught that no amount of spiritual technique can succeed when practiced from this consciousness, because the very premise contradicts spiritual reality. The journey of transformation isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about awakening to what you've always been. When you recognize your oneness with the light, you stop trying to reach across an imaginary chasm and instead rest in the awareness that no separation ever existed except in human thought. I've Witness this principle revolutionize people's spiritual practice. After decades of effort, striving, and disappointment, the simple recognition of oneness with divine light brings a peace and power that no technique could ever produce. It's like someone who has been knocking frantically at a door, suddenly realizing they've been standing inside the house all along. This mindset revolution completely redefines what it means to seek spiritual guidance. Instead of looking for signs, synchronicities, or dramatic interventions, you begin to trust the quiet knowing that emerges from your oneness with divine intelligence. The guidance doesn't come to you from somewhere else. It arises from within the unified field of consciousness that you share with the divine. If you've ever had a moment where guidance seemed to arise from nowhere, not as an external voice, but as an inner knowing that felt both completely natural and surprisingly wise, share in the comments. The light speaks within me. To help make this profound wisdom practical in your daily life, Joel Goldsmith shared a transformational technique he called resting in the Word, or what we might call resting in the light. This practice works as a complement to the understanding we've been exploring, helping to deepen your receptivity to spiritual illumination in tangible ways. When you face what appears as darkness in your life, whether it's a health challenge, financial struggle, or relationship conflict, the natural human response is to struggle against it, to fight, to try to fix what seems broken. But Joel discovered a hidden truth. This struggle actually keeps your consciousness locked in the very darkness you're trying to escape. Ready to continue this journey of spiritual illumination? Subscribe now to access more teachings that reveal the profound truth of who you really are. Your transformation is just beginning. Instead of battling shadows, the practice invites you to select a spiritual truth that addresses the consciousness behind the problem. For example, if you're experiencing lack, you might choose to rest in the truth that divine abundance flows through all creation. If you're facing illness, you might rest in perfect wholeness is the reality of my being. The key insight here is that you don't repeat these statements mechanically like affirmations. You sit with them, you marinate in them, you allow them to permeate your awareness like sunlight warming soil, creating the perfect conditions for growth. This isn't positive thinking. It's a deliberate alignment with spiritual reality that transforms your consciousness from within. The power of this practice comes when you stop trying to make the truth work for you and instead allow yourself to rest in it completely. It's similar to how a musician must surrender to the music rather than forcing it, or how an artist learns to flow with inspiration rather than controlling it. There's a profound alchemy that happens in that surrender. Now, I want to share another revolutionary aspect of Joel's teaching that often goes overlooked but holds tremendous power for transformation. He discovered that most spiritual seeking is intensely personal, focused on my problems, my needs, my darkness. While this seems logical, Joel found that this personal focus actually limits what can be received. Think about it. When your consciousness is contracted around your personal concerns, it's like trying to receive the ocean through a drinking straw. The breakthrough comes through what Joel called impersonal spiritual work, which expands your awareness beyond individual concerns to recognize that divine light illuminates everyone equally. In practice, this means that instead of praying for your healing, you recognize that wholeness is the spiritual truth for all beings everywhere. Instead of seeking your supply, you acknowledge that divine abundance flows through all creation without exception. This shift might seem subtle, but its impact is profound. When you rise into this universal consciousness, you access a dimension of spiritual reality that transcends personal limitations. From that expanded awareness, your individual experience naturally aligns with the greater truth you've recognized. It's like a drop of water that, instead of trying to change its own nature, simply recognizes its oneness with the ocean. This mindset revolution challenges the very foundation of how most people approach spirituality, revealing a path that doesn't require struggle, but rather a progressive awakening to what has always been true. The journey isn't about making something happen, but allowing yourself to perceive what already is. If you've glimpsed how this impersonal approach to spirituality might transform your relationship with challenges in your life, share in the comments. I embrace the universal light. A fascinating obstacle emerges on this spiritual journey that few people recognize. The moment you begin seeking spiritual illumination, your human mind immediately creates mental pictures of how that light should appear, when it should arrive, and what form it should take. These mental images, while natural, actually become barriers to receiving what divine intelligence is providing. Think about it. If you've decided exactly how your spiritual awakening should unfold, you're essentially telling the infinite to fit into your finite box. It's like ordering a specific dish at a restaurant when the universe has prepared an entire feast beyond your imagination. Joel discovered that true receptivity includes releasing your attachment to specific outcomes. This doesn't mean abandoning your intentions or desires. Rather, it means holding them with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. When you present your need for illumination to divine consciousness, learn to step back and remain open to how that light might shine through. The universe has infinite pathways to illuminate your understanding, but if you're demanding one specific manifestation, you close yourself to countless other possibilities. Joel often shared with his students that divine illumination frequently comes in forms we don't expect, through channels we never anticipated. Your mental pictures limit the infinite to your finite imagination. The revolutionary practice is to state your intention for clarity clearly, then silently add, "This or something better for the highest good," releasing your grip on how it must happen. Now I want to explore what Joel considered the most advanced practice of all, what he called living by grace. This represents a profound shift from asking God to illuminate your path to recognizing that divine light is already shining in every situation you encounter. You stop trying to generate or attract light and start acknowledging the divine illumination that never ceases. This is the difference between effortful seeking and receptive allowing. Living by grace means moving through your day with the awareness that infinite intelligence is already governing every situation. You don't have to make everything happen through human effort alone. You do your part with wisdom and diligence, but you trust that there's a divine component working through and beyond your efforts. When challenges arise, instead of frantically asking for light to appear in your darkness, you pause and recognize that divine intelligence is already present with wisdom beyond your understanding. The revelation here is that you're not asking for intervention, but for the awareness to perceive the spiritual reality that already contains everything you need. I've witnessed this subtle shift transform people's lives from constant struggle to graceful unfolding. A woman I know who practiced this principle stopped frantically seeking answers before every decision. Instead, she lived in continuous communion with divine intelligence, trusting she would know what to do when action was required. The difference was palpable. Her life flowed with an ease and harmony that no amount of spiritual striving had ever produced. The journey from mental pictures to living by grace represents a profound evolution in consciousness. You're no longer trying to manipulate reality through spiritual techniques. You're allowing yourself to be a clear channel through which divine light naturally expresses. If you've experienced moments where you surrendered your mental pictures and unexpectedly found greater illumination than you could have imagined, share in the comments. Grace exceeds imagination. Of course, the path of spiritual illumination isn't without its challenges. And one of the most common roadblocks people encounter is simple impatience. You practice these principles for a few days or perhaps a couple of weeks, and when dramatic illumination doesn't immediately transform your life, you conclude the teaching doesn't work and return to old patterns. It's at this precise moment that most people abandon the practice, often just before the consciousness shift would have manifested visible results. Joel consistently emphasized that consciousness transformation isn't an overnight phenomenon. This journey isn't about trying a new technique or adopting a trendy spiritual practice. You're essentially undoing years, sometimes decades, of conditioned thinking, deeply ingrained fear patterns, and an entire worldview built on the belief in separation. This mental reprogramming doesn't dissolve in an instant simply because you intellectually grasp a concept. The key insight here is consistency without anxiety about timing. Your daily practice isn't about seeing immediate results, but about cultivating a new foundation of awareness as your natural state of being. The timeline varies dramatically from person to person. Some experience rapid transformation, while others need months of faithful practice before visible changes manifest. Neither timeline reflects your worthiness or the truth of the principle. Trust the process even when physical evidence seems to contradict what you're practicing. The consciousness shift happens first in the invisible realm of awareness, with outer circumstances reorganizing themselves according to your transformed perception. Patience here isn't passive waiting, but active trust in the unfolding of divine timing. Equally challenging is the tendency to forget everything you've learned the moment crisis strikes. You might practice beautifully when life flows smoothly, but when serious trouble hits, a health diagnosis, financial collapse, or relationship breakdown, panic often takes over and you forget your spiritual foundation. Suddenly, the light seems distant and you find yourself back in darkness. What's fascinating is that Joel himself experienced this pattern in his early years of practice. During intense difficulties, the temptation to abandon spiritual principles and resort to human panic was overwhelming. The revelation here isn't that you should never falter. It's that faltering doesn't represent failure. The journey isn't about perfect, uninterrupted awareness, but about how quickly you can return to the light when you notice you've forgotten. The mindset revolution comes when you stop judging yourself for temporary lapses and instead gently guide yourself back to recognizing the light as soon as you notice its apparent absence. This compassionate self-awareness becomes its own practice. Each time you catch yourself reverting to fear-based consciousness and choose to return to light awareness, you strengthen your spiritual muscles. This is why establishing your spiritual foundation during relatively peaceful times matters so deeply. You're building an inner sanctuary that becomes increasingly accessible even during life's inevitable storms. Like a sailor who has practiced navigation in calm waters, you'll find yourself better equipped to maintain your bearings when the seas grow rough. If you've ever noticed how challenges that once would have completely derailed you now only temporarily shake your center, share in the comments, "My light grows stronger through every storm." For those who have established a foundation in these principles, Joel offered a transformative practice that takes spiritual illumination beyond formal meditation sessions and into everyday life. He called it practicing the presence, and it represents a profound integration of spiritual awareness with mundane activities. The breakthrough insight here is that many spiritual seekers create an artificial divide between their spiritual practice and daily living. They meditate in the morning, experience profound states of consciousness, and then step into their day completely disconnected from that awareness. It's like having access to an incredible source of light, but only turning it on during designated times. Joel recommended a revolutionary approach, moment-by-moment awareness of divine light throughout your day. As you wash dishes, drive to work, engage in conversations, or handle routine tasks, practice recognizing the divine light illuminating each of these moments. This isn't about maintaining an otherworldly state while trying to function in the world. It's about recognizing that every activity, no matter how mundane, can be a vehicle for spiritual awareness. This practice gradually bridges the gap between meditation and daily living. The illumination you experience during quiet contemplation begins to permeate your active hours until there's no separation between your spiritual life and your human experience. Your entire existence becomes illuminated by conscious awareness of the divine light that never dims. I've witnessed remarkable transformations in people who commit to this practice. A businessman who had struggled to connect his spiritual insights with his professional life began pausing briefly before meetings to recognize divine intelligence present in the room. Within months, his decision-making improved dramatically, relationships with colleagues deepened, and he found himself navigating complex situations with wisdom that surprised even him. Now, I want to share what Joel considered the ultimate revelation of this spiritual journey, a truth so profound that it transforms everything when fully grasped. The ultimate discovery is not that divine light illuminates your path or guides your decisions. It's that you yourself are the light, not your human personality or limited ego, but the divine consciousness that is your true nature. When Jesus said, "Ye are the light of the world," he wasn't speaking metaphorically or offering poetic encouragement. He was stating a literal truth about your spiritual identity. Everything you've been seeking outside yourself, wisdom, love, abundance, peace, is actually the nature of your own being when recognized spiritually. This recognition doesn't inflate the ego, it dissolves it. The limited sense of self that has been seeking light surrenders to the awareness that it was always an expression of the light it sought. This isn't spiritual theory. It's the practical foundation for a completely transformed experience of life. From this awareness, spiritual illumination isn't something you attain through effort or practice. It becomes your natural state, as effortless as the sun shining. The journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about awakening to what you've always been. If you've experienced even a glimpse of this profound truth, that you are not separate from the light, but are the light itself in expression, share in the comments, "I am the light I seek." As we come to the end of our exploration of this profound spiritual truth, I hope you're beginning to see the divine light that has always been at the core of your being. This understanding of "let there be light" isn't just philosophical. It's a practical foundation for experiencing life from an entirely new dimension of awareness. If something within you resonated with these teachings today, if you felt a quiet recognition stir within your consciousness, that's not coincidence. That's the light within you responding to truth. Our journey of spiritual discovery doesn't end here. It's an ongoing awakening that unfolds in beautiful and unexpected ways. I'd love for you to join me on this journey of consciousness. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested in more explorations of these timeless spiritual principles that transform not just your thinking, but your entire experience of life. Each video is designed to illuminate another facet of the spiritual diamond that is your true nature. If this message spoke directly to your heart today, leave a comment saying, "The light is awakening in me," so I know these teachings have found their home. Your engagement helps this wisdom reach others who may be searching for exactly this understanding. And if you found value in our time together, a simple like on this video helps create a ripple effect, allowing these insights to reach those who need them most. It's a small gesture that makes a meaningful difference. There's a video right here that complements today's exploration, diving into how this principle of divine light transforms your relationship with challenges. Click and continue with me over there. Each understanding builds upon the last, creating a foundation of spiritual awareness that nothing can shake. Until next time, remember that you are not separate from the light you seek. You are that light in expression, illuminating every path you walk.
For 2,000 years, we have misunderstood one of the most powerful spiritual laws ever spoken. When Jesus said, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," he was not talking about charity. He was not talking about money. He was revealing a secret about consciousness that changes everything you think you know about receiving. Most people treat this teaching like a spiritual transaction. They give expecting to receive. They donate hoping for blessings. They serve while secretly counting what comes back. But this mercantile approach to spirituality blocks the very flow Jesus was describing. It turns divine law into human bargaining. Joel Goldsmith spent decades discovering what Jesus actually meant. He found that giving in the spiritual sense has nothing to do with physical objects or actions. It is about the giving of your consciousness, the radiation of your awareness, the sharing of your inner realization of truth. This is the secret that transforms everything. When you truly understand this principle as Goldsmith taught it, you stop trying to get anything from the universe. You stop manipulating spiritual laws for personal gain. You begin to give from the infinite source within you, and that is when the real miracles begin to unfold in your life. The traditional interpretation has created generations of spiritual seekers who give to get. They perform acts of kindness while watching for returns. They share resources while mentally calculating cosmic interest rates. This is not the teaching Jesus revealed. This is human nature dressed in spiritual language. Goldsmith discovered that biblical giving means something radically different. It means giving your attention to truth rather than appearances. It means giving your faith to the invisible rather than the visible. It means giving recognition to the spiritual reality behind all material forms. When Jesus spoke of giving, he was teaching about consciousness, not currency. He was revealing that what you acknowledge, recognize, and give your awareness to becomes your experience. If you give your consciousness to lack, you experience lack. If you give your consciousness to divine abundance, abundance flows. This understanding changes the entire spiritual journey. You are not trying to earn blessings through good behavior. You are not attempting to manipulate God through generous actions. You are learning to give your inner attention to the truth of infinite supply already present in consciousness. Consider how this works in practical terms. A woman named Catherine struggled financially for years despite tithing faithfully and volunteering constantly. She gave and gave, always expecting her breakthrough. She felt frustrated, even betrayed by the teaching. Where was her return? Then she encountered Goldsmith's writings on consciousness. She realized she had been giving things while withholding her consciousness. Even while donating money, her mind was fixed on her bills, her debts, her lack. She was giving materially, but taking mentally, constantly drawing from the appearance of limitation. Catherine began a new practice. Instead of forcing herself to give money she felt she lacked, she started giving her attention to the truth of infinite divine supply. She would sit quietly and acknowledge the presence of abundance in consciousness itself, not in her bank account. She gave recognition to this invisible reality. Within 3 months, unexpected opportunities appeared, not because she manipulated a cosmic vending machine, but because her consciousness had shifted from taking to giving. She was no longer trying to extract from the universe. She was radiating awareness of what already existed spiritually, and material circumstances reflected this inner change. The secret Joel Goldsmith uncovered goes even deeper. Giving in the spiritual sense means releasing your consciousness from the belief in limited supply altogether. It means giving up the mental struggle to get, achieve, earn, or deserve. You stop taking thoughts from the world and start giving truth from within. This is why Jesus connected giving with receiving in the same breath. It is not cause and effect across time. It is the same movement of consciousness. The moment you give recognition to spiritual truth, you receive the experience of that truth. They are simultaneous because they are one activity. Most people never experience this because they separate the giving from the receiving. They give today hoping to receive tomorrow, They give here expecting to receive there. But consciousness does not work that way. What you give your awareness to in this moment is what you receive as experience in this moment. When Goldsmith taught students to give spiritually, he meant give your consciousness to God, to truth, to the invisible reality of perfection. Stop taking your thoughts from appearances. Stop extracting your beliefs from circumstances. Begin to give from the infinite well within, and watch how receiving happens not as a future reward, but as a present reality. A man named Matteo had tried every manifestation technique for years. He visualized, affirmed, and gave generously to charities. Still, his business struggled. He felt exhausted by the constant mental effort to create results. Everything felt like taking, even his spiritual practices. Then Matteo read Goldsmith's teaching about giving consciousness rather than things. He realized his entire approach had been about extraction. Even his prayers were attempts to pull blessings from God. His affirmations were efforts to take from the universe. His giving was strategic manipulation. Matteo began a completely different practice. Each morning, instead of visualizing what he wanted to receive, he sat in silence and gave his attention to the presence of infinite intelligence within his own consciousness. He stopped trying to take wisdom and started acknowledging the wisdom already present. He would sit with business challenges, and instead of desperately seeking solutions, he would give recognition to the divine mind that already knew the answer. He stopped taking thoughts of worry and started giving awareness to peace. He stopped extracting plans and started radiating trust. The transformation in Matteo's experience was gradual but undeniable. Within 2 months, solutions began appearing that he had never considered. Opportunities emerged without his usual forceful effort. His business started flowing because his consciousness had shifted from taking to giving. The key was subtle but powerful. Matteo was no longer trying to get anything from the spiritual dimension. He was giving his recognition to what already existed there. He was no longer depleting himself through mental extraction. He was radiating from an inner source. Clients noticed a difference in his presence. He seemed more confident, more peaceful, more genuinely helpful. They were responding not to his sales techniques but to the consciousness he was radiating. He was giving something invisible but completely tangible. This is what Goldsmith meant by give and it shall be given. Matteo was giving his awareness to infinite intelligence, and infinite intelligence was being given back to him as ideas, opportunities, connections. The giving and receiving were one simultaneous movement of consciousness, not separated by time or effort. Another breakthrough story involves a teacher named Maria, who felt completely burned out. She had given everything to her students for 20 years, her time, energy, resources, creativity. Yet she felt empty, resentful, and exhausted. Where was the promised return? Maria discovered Goldsmith's teaching at her lowest point. She realized she had been giving from a human sense of limited personal resources. She gave until she felt depleted because she believed she was giving from herself. This is why the giving felt draining rather than renewing. Goldsmith taught that true spiritual giving flows from consciousness itself, which is infinite and never depleted. Maria learned to stop giving from her limited human sense and start giving from her awareness of divine presence. She would enter her classroom each day not asking how much she had to give, but acknowledging the infinite wisdom and love flowing through her. The change was remarkable. Her work became effortless rather than exhausting. She had more energy at the end of days than at the beginning. Students responded with deeper engagement. Maria was finally experiencing what Jesus taught because she was giving from the right source, from consciousness itself rather than from personal willpower. The teaching transforms when you realize that consciousness is the currency of the spiritual universe. You are always giving your consciousness to something. The question is what? Are you giving it to appearances or to truth? Are you giving it to problems or to presence? Are you giving it to lack or to abundance? Every moment of awareness is an act of giving. When you give your attention to fear, you receive more fear. When you give your consciousness to divine perfection, you receive the experience of perfection. This is the law Jesus taught, and it operates with absolute precision every moment. Goldsmith spent his life helping people understand this principle not as theology, but as practical spiritual science. You are not trying to be good enough to deserve blessings. You are learning to give your consciousness to the blessings that already exist in the invisible realm, and that recognition becomes your visible experience. The old interpretation kept people in spiritual poverty despite generous actions. The true understanding liberates you into the flow of infinite supply because you discover you are not trying to get anything. You are learning to give recognition to everything that already exists in consciousness. If these stories of transformed understanding inspire you, like this video to help others discover what Jesus really taught. Subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which insight shifted your perspective on giving and receiving. Beyond the basic principle, Goldsmith taught specific practices for giving consciousness rather than things. The first practice is radical simplicity. Throughout your day, notice when you are trying to take something mentally. Notice when you are trying to extract security from circumstances, love from people, or peace from conditions. In those moments, stop the taking. Instead, give your attention to the truth that security, love, and peace exist in consciousness itself, independent of conditions. You are not looking at your bank account for security. You are giving recognition to the divine presence that is security itself. This is the practice of giving. The second practice involves releasing the belief that you must earn or deserve what you need. This belief keeps you in a taking mentality, constantly trying to qualify for blessings. Goldsmith taught that spiritual giving means acknowledging that infinite good already exists in consciousness, available not through earning but through recognition. When you catch yourself trying to deserve love, success, or health, pause and give your awareness instead to the truth that these qualities exist in consciousness right now. You are not working to achieve them. You are giving recognition to their present reality. This shift from taking through effort to giving through awareness changes everything. The third practice is perhaps the most challenging. Goldsmith taught that true giving includes giving up your demands about how good should appear. Most people give consciousness to their desired outcomes, their specific pictures of how life should look. This is actually a sophisticated form of taking. Real spiritual giving means offering your consciousness to divine intelligence without dictating the form. You give recognition to infinite wisdom and then release your attachment to particular appearances. You stop trying to extract your version of good and start radiating openness to how consciousness itself wants to express. A businessman named Robert practiced this with remarkable results. Instead of visualizing specific deals closing, he began each day giving his attention to divine intelligence operating through his business. He acknowledged infinite wisdom without telling it what form that wisdom should take. Within weeks, opportunities emerged that were far better than what he had been trying to force. Partnerships formed that he never would have imagined. Robert learned that when you give consciousness to truth without demands, life organizes itself in ways beyond personal planning. The giving becomes effortless and the receiving becomes miraculous. Another essential practice involves giving consciousness during apparent lack or crisis. This is when most people revert to taking mentality. When problems appear, the automatic response is to grab at solutions, to take thoughts of worry, to extract yourself from discomfort through mental struggling. Goldsmith taught the opposite approach. When challenges appear, that is precisely when to practice giving consciousness to truth. Instead of taking anxious thoughts about the problem, give your attention to the presence of divine wisdom within the situation. Instead of extracting yourself through panic, radiate trust in invisible intelligence. A woman named Jennifer faced a serious health diagnosis. Her first response was typical taking behavior. She desperately searched for solutions, consumed information anxiously, and tried to force healing through willpower. She felt exhausted and more frightened daily. The taking mentality depleted her. Then she remembered Goldsmith's teaching. She began giving her consciousness to the truth of spiritual perfection instead of taking fearful thoughts from medical appearances. Each day she sat quietly acknowledging divine life as the only reality. She gave her awareness to wholeness instead of trying to extract healing from treatments. Her recovery was steady and complete. The final complementary practice is giving consciousness in relationships. Most human interaction operates on taking. People take validation from others, take security from approval, take identity from recognition. Even in giving physically, they are often taking emotionally. This creates exhausting, depleting relationships. Goldsmith taught that spiritual relationship means giving consciousness of the divine presence in the other person. You are not looking at them to take what you need. You are giving recognition to the spiritual reality they embody. You acknowledge the Christ consciousness in them, rather than extracting personal satisfaction from them. When you practice this, relationships transform completely. You stop being drained by people because you are not taking from them. You stop trying to change them because you are giving recognition to their spiritual perfection. They sense this shift and often respond with their own higher consciousness. A mother named Susan struggled with her teenage daughter for years. Every interaction was a battle because Susan was constantly trying to take compliance, respect, and validation from her daughter. Then Susan began giving consciousness of divine wisdom and love present in her daughter, instead of taking desired behavior. Within months, their relationship healed in ways counseling had never achieved. Despite understanding the principle, many people encounter a persistent challenge. They find themselves unconsciously reverting to taking mentality, especially under stress. Old patterns of trying to extract security, love, or success from external sources feel automatic and overwhelming. This is completely normal in the early stages. Goldsmith taught that this struggle reveals the depth of human conditioning. For years, perhaps lifetimes, consciousness has been trained to take rather than give. The mind has learned to grab at circumstances for identity, to extract validation from achievements, to pull security from conditions. These patterns do not dissolve instantly. The solution is not to fight the taking mentality, but to consistently, gently return to giving consciousness. When you notice yourself trying to extract peace from circumstances, pause without self-judgment. Simply redirect your attention to giving recognition to the peace that exists in consciousness itself. This is spiritual practice. A man named Thomas struggled with this for months. He would practice giving consciousness in the morning, then spend his day unconsciously taking thoughts of worry from work situations. He felt discouraged by his inability to maintain the giving consciousness. This discouragement itself was another form of taking. Thomas' breakthrough came when he stopped judging his taking patterns and simply kept returning to giving. He realized that the judgment itself was taking, trying to extract a perfect spiritual state from himself. Instead, he began treating each moment of awareness as a new opportunity to give consciousness to truth. He stopped expecting himself to never slip into taking mentality. Instead, he practiced noticing when it happened and gently redirecting his attention. Over time, the giving consciousness became more natural, more sustained. The key was patience with the process rather than demands for instant transformation. Goldsmith emphasized that spiritual development is gradual. You are retraining consciousness from lifelong habits of taking to a new pattern of giving. This does not happen through force or self-criticism. It happens through consistent, compassionate practice. Each time you redirect from taking to giving, you strengthen the new pattern. Another common challenge involves feeling that giving consciousness seems ineffective when circumstances do not immediately change. People practice giving their attention to divine abundance but still see lack in their bank account. They give consciousness to perfect health but still experience symptoms. This apparent contradiction causes doubt. Goldsmith taught that this challenge reveals a misunderstanding of time and consciousness. When you give your awareness to spiritual truth, you are not causing a future material change. You are recognizing a present spiritual reality. The material reflection of that reality may take time to appear, but the spiritual reality exists now. The mistake is measuring the effectiveness of giving consciousness by immediate material results. This is actually reverting to taking mentality, trying to extract visible proof from invisible practice. True spiritual giving means acknowledging truth regardless of appearances, not because of them or to change them. A woman named Patricia struggled with this for a year. She faithfully gave her consciousness to divine abundance but saw no financial improvement. She felt tempted to abandon the practice as ineffective. Then she realized she was still taking, still trying to use spiritual giving to extract material results. Patricia shifted her approach completely. She continued giving consciousness to infinite supply, but she stopped demanding that her bank balance reflect this immediately. She gave her awareness to truth for its own sake, not as a technique to change appearances. Within 3 months of this genuine shift, her financial situation transformed through unexpected channels. The deepest challenge many face is the fear that giving consciousness without taking anything in return leaves them vulnerable and unprotected. If you stop trying to extract security from circumstances, what protects you? If you stop grabbing at opportunities, will you miss out? This fear keeps people locked in taking mentality. Goldsmith addressed this fear directly. He taught that the taking mentality creates the very vulnerability it fears. When you try to extract your good from external sources, you are dependent on those sources. You are at the mercy of circumstances, people, and conditions. This is the ultimate vulnerability and insecurity. True spiritual giving liberates you from this dependence. When you give your consciousness to the infinite source within, you are no longer vulnerable to external changes. You are drawing from a well that never runs dry. You are radiating from a source that never depletes. This is real security. A businessman named Allen faced this fear during an economic downturn. His instinct was to grab at every opportunity, to take aggressively in a competitive market. But he had been studying Goldsmith and decided to practice giving consciousness instead. He gave his attention to divine intelligence operating through his business rather than trying to extract success from circumstances. If these techniques for overcoming obstacles resonate with your journey, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith teachings, and comment which challenge you are ready to transform through giving consciousness. In advanced practice, giving consciousness becomes your natural state rather than a deliberate technique. You find yourself spontaneously giving attention to truth instead of taking thoughts from appearances. This happens not through effort, but through the gradual retraining of awareness that comes from consistent practice over time. Goldsmith described this as living from consciousness rather than from conditions. Instead of checking circumstances to determine how you feel and what you think, you begin each moment by giving your awareness to the spiritual reality within consciousness. Then you allow circumstances to reflect that inner reality rather than dictating it. A teacher named Elizabeth reached this stage after 2 years of practice. She noticed that her first response to challenges was no longer anxiety or problem-solving. Her natural response became giving her attention to the presence of divine wisdom. This was not forced discipline, but genuine shift in consciousness. When her school faced budget cuts threatening her position, Elizabeth did not panic or scheme. She gave her consciousness to the truth of divine supply and perfect right action. She continued her work with peace and excellence. Within a month, a better position opened at another school with higher pay and more fulfillment. Advanced giving consciousness also transforms how you experience abundance. Instead of seeing prosperity as accumulation of things, you recognize it as the radiation of consciousness. You are not trying to get more. You are giving more awareness to the infinite good already present in the invisible realm. This shift eliminates the tension and struggle around money and resources. You are not striving to extract wealth from the world. You are acknowledging the infinite supply in consciousness and allowing it to take whatever material form serves your spiritual journey. The giving is effortless because you are giving from infinity. A woman named Rachel experienced this transformation in her business. She had built success through aggressive taking, constantly pushing for more clients and more revenue. Then she learned Goldsmith's principle and began giving consciousness to divine abundance instead of taking market share from competitors. Her business did not shrink as she feared. Instead, it flourished in new ways. Clients came through unexpected referrals. Opportunities appeared without her usual hustling. Rachel was working less but receiving more because she had shifted from taking consciousness to giving consciousness. The universe responds to what you radiate, not what you grab at. In relationships, advanced practice means giving consciousness of love without taking anything in return. This sounds idealistic, but it is profoundly practical. When you give recognition to the divine love present in consciousness itself, you stop depleting yourself by trying to extract love from people who may not be capable of giving it. Goldsmith taught that most relationship suffering comes from taking mentality. People try to take validation from partners, take security from family, take identity from friendships. When others fail to provide what is being taken, resentment and pain result. The taking creates the suffering. A man named Christopher transformed his marriage through this understanding. He had spent years trying to take appreciation and affirmation from his wife. He felt chronically disappointed and resentful. Then he began giving his consciousness to the divine love that exists independent of her responses. This was not resignation or suppression. It was genuine spiritual giving. Christopher acknowledged the presence of infinite love in consciousness and stopped demanding that his wife provide it. Remarkably, as he stopped taking from her, she began naturally giving more. The pressure dissolved and authentic connection emerged. Perhaps the most advanced application involves giving consciousness during apparent tragedy or loss. When life brings death, illness, or devastating change, every human instinct screams to take control, to fix, to resist. This taking creates additional suffering on top of the original pain. Goldsmith taught that even in darkness, especially in darkness, you can practice giving consciousness to the presence of God. This is not denial of human grief. It is the recognition of spiritual reality alongside the material appearance. You acknowledge the pain while giving your deepest awareness to the eternal life and perfect love that exists beyond all circumstances. A woman named Daniela faced her husband's terminal diagnosis. Her grief was profound and real, but she also practiced giving her consciousness to the truth of eternal life and divine presence. She did not deny her tears, but she also gave recognition to something beyond death. This practice did not prevent loss, but it transformed her experience of loss. Daniela found herself surrounded by unexpected peace even in heartbreak. She was able to be present with her husband's final months without being consumed by desperate taking, trying to extract impossibilities from the situation. The giving consciousness held her through what should have been unbearable. After months or years of practice, you begin to see the entire teaching differently. Give and it shall be given is not a command or a promise of reward. It is a description of how consciousness actually works. What you give your awareness to becomes your experience. This is not negotiable or optional. It is the fundamental law of spiritual life. You realize you have always been giving your consciousness to something. The question was never whether to give, but what to give your awareness to. Before understanding the teaching, you were unconsciously giving consciousness to appearances, to problems, to lack, to fear. Now you are consciously giving it to truth. The transformation is complete when giving consciousness becomes as natural as breathing. You no longer think about the technique. You simply live from the awareness of infinite presence within you. You radiate truth not as a practice, but as your natural state. This is what Jesus was teaching. A man named Michael reached this understanding after 3 years with Goldsmith's materials. He could no longer imagine living any other way. Giving his consciousness to divine reality had become his automatic response to every situation. Life had not become problem-free, but his relationship to life had fundamentally changed. At this stage of understanding, you recognize that you are not really giving anything at all in the human sense. You are simply acknowledging what already is. The infinite good exists in consciousness already. Perfect love, infinite wisdom, complete abundance. These are not things you create or earn or extract. They are what you recognize and allow. This recognition is what Jesus called giving. You give your attention, your awareness, your acknowledgement to spiritual reality, and in that very giving, you receive the experience of what you have recognized. The giving and receiving are not separated by time. They are one simultaneous movement of consciousness. Goldsmith spent his life pointing students toward this simplicity. Stop trying to get from the world. Stop trying to take from God. Simply give your consciousness to truth, and truth becomes your living experience. This is the secret hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. This is the teaching that transforms everything. A woman named Claire finally understood after hearing this message repeatedly. She stopped all her complicated spiritual practices and techniques. She simply began giving her awareness to the presence of God throughout her day, acknowledging it while washing dishes, driving to work, sitting in meetings, just giving recognition to what already existed. Her life did not become suddenly perfect, but her experience of life became increasingly peaceful and abundant. Challenges still appeared, but she no longer struggled with them through taking mentality. She gave her consciousness to divine wisdom, and solutions appeared naturally. She gave her awareness to infinite supply, and resources flowed from unexpected sources. Claire understood what Jesus meant. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You are not traveling toward it or earning it or deserving it. You are giving your consciousness to its present reality, and that recognition transforms your entire experience of life. This is the true meaning of give, and it shall be given. The teaching works because consciousness is the only reality. The material world is the reflection of consciousness, not the source of it. When you understand this, you stop trying to change the reflection and start giving your attention to the source. You stop taking from appearances and start giving recognition to reality. This is why Goldsmith's teaching feels both ancient and revolutionary. It is what Jesus taught, what all mystics have taught, but it contradicts everything the material world tells you. The world says take, grab, extract, earn, deserve, fight for what you need. Jesus said, give consciousness to truth, and everything is added unto you. You stand now at a choice point that every spiritual seeker eventually faces. Will you continue living from taking consciousness, trying to extract your good from the world? Or will you begin the practice of giving consciousness to the infinite reality within you? This is not a small decision. It is the choice that determines your entire experience of life. Joel Goldsmith dedicated his life to making this teaching practical and clear. Give and it shall be given means give your awareness to spiritual truth and receive the experience of that truth. Stop trying to take from conditions and start radiating from consciousness. This is the secret that has the power to transform everything. The practice begins simply. Throughout today, notice when you are trying to take something mentally, taking security from circumstances, taking validation from people, taking peace from conditions. In those moments, pause and redirect. Give your consciousness instead to the spiritual reality that exists independent of appearances. Do not expect instant perfection in this practice. You are retraining consciousness from lifelong patterns, but each time you redirect from taking to giving, you strengthen your awareness of the infinite source within you. Over time, this becomes your natural state. You live from consciousness rather than from conditions, and everything changes. If your understanding of this teaching has expanded through Joel Goldsmith's wisdom, like this video to share it with others, subscribe for more transformational spiritual content, and comment, I give consciousness to confirm your commitment to this practice.
Today, we're going to uncover a truth that's been hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. This isn't another sermon telling you to pray harder, believe stronger, or wait patiently for God to finally notice you. What you're about to discover might surprise you because it completely contradicts what you've heard from every pulpit, every Sunday school lesson, and every religious authority figure in your life. Have you ever wondered why your most desperate prayers seem to go unanswered while Jesus promised that you would do even greater works than he did? What if everything you've been taught about following Jesus has been carefully designed to keep you powerless, dependent, and forever seeking something that's already within your grasp right now? Here's the uncomfortable reality that most churches won't tell you. Jesus never intended to create a religion of worship around himself. He wasn't building a system where you'd spend your entire life begging an unreachable divine figure for scraps of mercy. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will fundamentally shift how you understand everything Jesus actually taught versus what you've been told he taught. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Think about this for a moment. Every time you've prayed for a miracle, what position were you in? You were likely on your knees, feeling small, confessing your unworthiness, listing your failures, and desperately pleading for God to intervene in your circumstances. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with everything you have, follow every instruction perfectly, yet the breakthrough you need remains frustratingly out of reach, as if there's an invisible wall between you and the divine power you're seeking. What if I told you that this entire approach is the exact opposite of what Jesus was demonstrating? When he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. When he promised, "You will do greater works than these," he wasn't exaggerating or speaking only to his disciples. He was revealing something revolutionary, that the Christ consciousness he embodied isn't exclusive, isn't distant, and isn't reserved for one perfect human being who lived 2 millennia ago. Jesus came to show you what's possible when a human being recognizes their true spiritual nature. He wasn't saying, worship me because I'm special and you're not. He was saying, follow me, learn what I've learned, access what I'm accessing, become what I'm demonstrating. But somewhere along the way, that message got twisted into a system that keeps you small, keeps you begging, and keeps you believing you're forever separated from the divine power that Jesus said lives within you. The difference between praying to Jesus and praying from Christ consciousness is the difference between remaining powerless and stepping into the same spiritual authority Jesus himself operated from. And what's about to unfold in this video will show you exactly how. Let's talk about what really happens inside your mind every single time you pray. You've been conditioned, trained from childhood to approach the divine from a position of absolute powerlessness. You start by rehearsing everything wrong with you. You catalog your mistakes, your failures, your unworthiness. You remind God as if he needs reminding of how broken and incomplete you are. Then, from that place of total lack, you beg for intervention. You plead for mercy. You promise to be better if only this one prayer gets answered. This is what I call beggar consciousness, and it's been embedded into your spiritual DNA through years of religious programming. Every prayer service, every altar call, every confession booth has reinforced this same message. You are separate from God, you are unworthy, you are powerless, and your only hope is that an external force might show you mercy if you grovel convincingly enough. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything about this journey of spiritual transformation. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he wasn't delivering a beautiful metaphor for Sunday morning inspiration. He was revealing the fundamental mechanics of how spiritual reality actually operates. The kingdom isn't somewhere else. It isn't locked behind pearly gates waiting for you after death. It isn't controlled by religious authorities who hold the keys to your salvation. It's within you right now, in this very moment. Think about the profound impact of what this actually means. Christ consciousness, the state of awareness where miracles flow naturally, isn't something Jesus possessed exclusively because he was special and you're not. It's your birthright, your true nature, the essence of who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and religious programming that's been layered on top of it. Every time you pray from that beggar mindset, you're making a declaration to the universe about who you believe yourself to be. You're affirming that you're incomplete, that you're broken, that you're separate from divine supply. And here's where it gets really interesting. Consciousness, being the creative force that it is, immediately goes to work manifesting more evidence of exactly what you're declaring. You pray for abundance while declaring you're in lack. You pray for healing while affirming you're diseased and powerless. You pray for breakthrough while reinforcing the very walls that keep you trapped. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending problems don't exist. This is about understanding that the miracles you've been seeking outside yourself have always been within, waiting for you to recognize them. The transformation doesn't happen through more intense begging or more fervent petition. It happens through a complete shift in consciousness, a fundamental change in how you understand your relationship with the divine. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what most people don't realize is that this beggar consciousness doesn't just affect your prayer life. It shapes your entire reality, every decision you make, every relationship you enter, every opportunity you see or miss. The consciousness you hold becomes the lens through which you experience everything. Write in the comments, "My consciousness is shifting," if this is beginning to reshape how you see your spiritual journey. So what does real prayer actually look like when you strip away all the religious theater and get down to the raw spiritual mechanics? It's not about asking at all. True prayer is recognition. It's aligning your awareness with what already exists in spiritual reality, not begging for something to come into existence. Let me make this practical for you, because this mindset shift is where the real transformation happens. When you're facing a health crisis, traditional religion teaches you to catalog every symptom to God, describe how much pain you're in, explain how desperate your situation is, and then beg for healing. But every word of that petition is actually reinforcing the problem. You're giving power to the disease. You're declaring it as real and threatening. You're affirming your powerlessness in the face of it. If you want to continue exploring these hidden truths that actually transform your life, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more here that will shift how you experience reality. The practice Jesus was actually demonstrating is radically different. Instead of begging God to fix what appears broken, you recognize that in the realm of pure consciousness, in spiritual reality, where everything originates, there is only wholeness and perfection. Disease doesn't exist there, lack doesn't exist there, limitation doesn't exist there. As you hold that recognition, as you rest in that awareness without fighting the appearance or fearing it, something extraordinary begins to happen. The body starts reflecting the consciousness you're holding, because physical form always follows consciousness. This is spiritual law, not religious hope. This is the hidden truth that religious institutions have worked tirelessly to keep buried. Because once you understand it, you don't need them anymore. You don't need intermediaries. You don't need special rituals or approved prayers or ordained authorities to grant you access to the divine. You have direct access right now, in this moment, through your own consciousness. And this brings us to something crucial about how Jesus positioned himself in relation to you. He never said, "Worship me and stay small." Those weren't his words or his intention. What he actually said was, "Follow me." Think about the massive difference between those two approaches. Worship keeps you at a distance, looking up at someone infinitely above you, hoping they'll notice you. Follow means come with me, learn what I'm learning, do what I'm doing, access what I'm accessing. Jesus was demonstrating a spiritual technology that every human being has access to. When he promised, "You will do greater works than these," he meant it literally, not as some impossible exaggeration. He was showing you the blueprint for how consciousness operates, how miracles manifest, how divine power flows through a human being who understands their true nature. This transformation from worshipper to practitioner is exactly what threatens institutional control. Because awakened people don't need permission to access the divine. The journey from powerless beggar to empowered spiritual being isn't about achieving some special status or becoming holier than others. It's about recognizing what's already true, what's always been true about who you actually are beneath all the religious programming. Every decision you make about whether to beg or recognize, whether to worship from a distance or follow into the same consciousness, shapes the reality you experience. What happens when you actually begin practicing this recognition instead of petition? When you start following Jesus' example instead of just worshiping his image? The impact on your daily life, your relationships, your health, your sense of purpose becomes undeniable. But there's something even deeper happening behind the scenes that most people never discover, and it has to do with how consciousness itself operates as the creative force in your life. Drop a comment saying, "I choose recognition," if this distinction between petition and recognition is clicking for you. Let me tell you something about the cross that will completely shift your understanding of what Jesus was actually demonstrating. Everything you've been taught about why Jesus died has been carefully constructed to keep you trapped in perpetual guilt and dependency. The traditional story goes like this. God was so furiously angry about humanity's sin that he required a blood sacrifice. and Jesus took the punishment you deserved so you could escape divine wrath. That narrative turns God into a vengeful tyrant and you into a condemned criminal who can only survive through someone else's suffering. But that's not what the cross demonstrates at all. Jesus wasn't appeasing an angry deity or paying off some cosmic debt. He was proving something far more profound about the nature of consciousness itself. He went through humanity's ultimate fear, physical death, and emerged on the other side to show you that your true identity is indestructible. You are not this temporary body that experiences pain, aging, and eventual dissolution. You are eternal consciousness having a temporary human experience. This revelation changes everything about how you understand suffering, challenges, and what you perceive as problems in your life. When difficulties arise, you're not being punished by a judgmental God testing your worthiness or paying you back for past mistakes. That entire framework keeps you imprisoned in fear and powerlessness. What's actually happening is something much more mechanical, much more predictable, and ultimately much more empowering. You're experiencing the external manifestation of whatever consciousness you've been holding. This is where the real transformation in your mindset begins, because once you grasp this spiritual law, you realize that changing your external circumstances isn't about manipulating the physical world or convincing God to intervene. It's about shifting the consciousness that's creating those circumstances in the first place. Think of it like this. Consciousness operates with the same consistency as gravity. When you hold an object and release it, you don't have to convince gravity to work or pray that the object falls. It falls because that's how physical law operates. In the same way, whatever you hold in consciousness must manifest in your external experience because that's how spiritual law operates. The external world has no choice but to reflect your internal state. This means that every persistent problem in your life, every pattern that keeps repeating, every limitation you keep encountering isn't evidence of God's disapproval or proof that you're cursed or unlucky. It's feedback showing you what consciousness you've been operating from. The journey toward transformation isn't about fixing what's outside. It's about recognizing and shifting what's inside, because the outside is simply the projection of the inside. Most people spend their entire lives trying to rearrange external circumstances while keeping the same internal consciousness that created those circumstances. They pray for financial breakthrough while maintaining poverty consciousness. They beg for healed relationships while holding resentment consciousness. They petition for opportunities while reinforcing victim consciousness. And then they wonder why nothing fundamentally changes, why the same patterns keep emerging in different forms. The hidden truth behind every spiritual teaching, the revelation that changes the entire game, is understanding that consciousness is the creative force. Not your actions, not your circumstances, not external conditions, but the consciousness you hold. This is what Jesus was demonstrating through every miracle, every teaching, every interaction. He was showing you how reality responds to consciousness, how form follows awareness, how your experience of life shifts when your internal state shifts. Right consciousness creates, if this principle is beginning to reshape how you understand the challenges you've been facing. Let me share a real story that demonstrates exactly how this shift from petition to recognition works when you're facing an impossible situation. There was a woman named Margaret who received a terminal diagnosis that doctors labeled incurable. She did everything traditional religion teaches. She attended healing services, had church elders lay hands on her, fasted for days, confessed every sin she could remember, and spent countless hours on her knees begging Jesus to intervene and fix what was happening in her body. Month after month, nothing changed. Her condition continued deteriorating. The despair was overwhelming because she'd followed every instruction perfectly, prayed with absolute sincerity, believed with everything she had. Yet the miracle remained frustratingly out of reach. She was exhausted from the journey, depleted from the constant battle, ready to give up entirely. Then something shifted in her understanding. She stopped cataloging her symptoms to God. She stopped describing how much pain she was in. She stopped begging for intervention. Instead, she began practicing something completely different. Every morning, she would sit in silence and recognize one simple truth. In spirit, there is no disease. She wasn't denying the physical symptoms or pretending they didn't exist. She was making a profound decision about what she would give ultimate authority to in her consciousness. The transformation didn't happen overnight like some charismatic miracle story. It unfolded gradually as her internal state shifted. First, the fear dissolved. Then the mental anguish began to lessen. Within 2 months, her doctors were completely baffled to find no trace of what they had confidently declared incurable. But here's what's crucial to understand about what actually happened. Margaret didn't get healed in the traditional sense of an external force fixing her broken body. She recognized that she'd never been separate from wholeness. The body simply reflected the change in consciousness. This is the practice of presence that changes everything, and it's the exact opposite of what you've been taught prayer should look like. Traditional prayer is you talking at God, presenting your wish list of needs and desires, explaining your problems in elaborate detail, and hoping someone out there is listening and cares enough to respond. You're having a one-sided conversation with a deity you imagine is somewhere far away, separate from you, occasionally intervening if you say the right words or demonstrate enough faith. If this video opened something in your awareness, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready for it. But real spiritual practice flips that entire approach. It's about becoming silent enough to listen. It's about recognizing that the presence you've been desperately seeking outside yourself is actually the essence of who you are. This isn't some abstract theological concept or poetic metaphor. This is the practical mechanics of how consciousness operates and how transformation actually happens. When you truly grasp that, Christ consciousness isn't something Jesus possessed exclusively 2,000 years ago, but is actually your consciousness right now. Everything about your spiritual journey shifts. You stop asking for things as if you're separate from the source of supply. You start receiving awareness of what already exists in the invisible realm of spirit. The miracles don't come from outside you. They emerge from within as you align with what's already true in consciousness. The hidden truth behind every manifestation, every healing, every breakthrough is this: physical form follows consciousness with absolute consistency. You can't force transformation by manipulating external circumstances. The impact happens when you shift what you're holding internally, and then watch as reality rearranges itself to match that internal shift. Type, "I'm listening now," if you're ready to practice presence instead of petition. Now here's where this gets really interesting, because there's a practice that completely inverts how you've been trained to handle problems. When something difficult appears in your life, whether it's a health crisis, a financial emergency, or a relationship falling apart, your immediate instinct is to fight it. You either physically battle against the circumstances, or you pray desperately for God to remove it. But here's what's happening behind the scenes that you probably don't realize. Every time you fight a problem, every time you focus all your energy on combating it, you're actually declaring that it has power. You're giving it authority over your consciousness. You're affirming it as real and threatening. This is the hidden truth that shifts everything about your approach to challenges. In spiritual reality, in the realm where consciousness is the only actual cause, the problem doesn't exist. It exists only in the realm of appearance, not in the realm of truth. You're not pretending difficulties aren't there or engaging in denial. You're making a profound decision about what you consider to be ultimate reality. The appearance is showing symptoms, circumstances, limitations. But you're recognizing that in pure consciousness, where everything originates, there is only wholeness, abundance, and infinite possibility. This practice requires you to hold two realities simultaneously. Yes, the appearance is here. Yes, the bank account shows zero. Yes, the body is displaying symptoms. Yes, the relationship is fractured. But you refuse to give those appearances the final word about your spiritual identity or the truth of your situation. As you rest in this recognition, as you stop empowering the problem by fighting it or fearing it, something extraordinary begins happening. The circumstances start shifting, not because you forced them through willpower, but because consciousness is reorganizing itself and physical form must follow. What makes this even more powerful is understanding where this transformation actually takes place. Every spiritual problem you've ever experienced, every challenge that's kept you trapped, every limitation that's felt insurmountable, exists only when your mind leaves the present moment. Think about this carefully. Right now, in this exact second, strip away all the mental commentary about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. Remove the stories about what your problem means, where it came from, how long it's lasted, or how bad it could get. In this pure present moment, where is the actual problem? You're alive right now. You're breathing. You're conscious and aware. Whatever crisis your mind wants to rehearse exists either in past regret or future anxiety, but it doesn't exist in this precise moment of now. Christ consciousness is only accessible in the present because the present is the only place that actually exists. Everything else is mental projection, stories you're telling yourself, fear-based scenarios you're imagining. The journey Jesus was demonstrating wasn't about escaping from life's challenges or pretending difficulties don't exist. It was about discovering where real life happens, which is always and only now. Pain might be present in this moment, physical discomfort might be here, but suffering, the mental anguish that torments you, requires thought about past or future. It requires your mind to leave the now and create elaborate narratives about what everything means. Drop "I choose now" in the comments if this revelation about presence is shifting how you relate to your challenges. Understanding presence leads us to something even more foundational, something that's at the root of every struggle you've ever faced. Every problem, every challenge, every miracle you're desperately seeking stems from one single belief that's been operating in the background of your consciousness your entire life. It's the belief in separation. You believe you're separate from God, separate from the supply you need, separate from the healing you want, separate from other people who seem to have what you lack. This separation consciousness is what Jesus was actually referring to when he talked about sin. Not in the moral sense of wrongdoing that deserves punishment, but in the original meaning of the word, which is missing the mark of truth. The truth is, there's only one divine consciousness appearing as many temporary forms. The person who betrayed you, the situation that hurt you, the circumstances that disappointed you, they're all divine. Consciousness temporarily forgetting itself, exactly as you sometimes forget your true nature. This revelation doesn't excuse harmful behavior or mean you accept abuse. What it does is remove the emotional charge that keeps you imprisoned by past experiences and current circumstances. When you recognize that everything you've been seeking exists right now in consciousness and you've never actually been separate from it, the entire journey transforms. You're not pursuing abundance, health, or peace as external goals somewhere out there that you have to earn or achieve. You're recognizing they exist in your consciousness this very moment, and your only work is allowing that recognition to become your lived experience. This is where the concept of grace becomes radically different from what religion has taught you. Grace isn't God showing mercy toward undeserving sinners who've groveled convincingly enough. Grace is the automatic flow of divine good that operates the moment you stop, trying to manipulate, control, and force outcomes through sheer human effort. Every frantic attempt to make something happen, every sleepless night spent strategizing, every anxious moment trying to figure out how to fix your situation comes from that deep belief in separation. The belief that if you don't hustle and scheme and force things into place, nothing will work out. Living by grace means recognizing that Source is already supplying everything before you even ask. This sounds passive to the achievement-oriented mindset that's been programmed into you, but it's actually the most active spiritual practice possible, because it requires constant vigilance against your ego's compulsive need to take control. Your ego believes that you must do something, must take charge, must ensure survival through constant action and manipulation. But spiritual consciousness is always doing everything. Your work is getting out of the way and allowing grace to operate without your interference. This requires a level of trust that feels impossible until you actually experience it working in your life. It means making decisions from a completely different foundation. Instead of asking, "What can I do to make this happen?" you're asking, "What is consciousness already doing, and how can I align with it?" The impact of this shift is profound because you're no longer exhausting yourself trying to force outcomes. You're resting in the recognition that divine good flows naturally when you stop blocking it with fear-based control. Write, "I trust the flow," if you're ready to release control and allow grace to operate in your life. Now here's something crucial that nobody warns you about, and it's the reason so many people abandon this entire practice right when it's about to break through. When you first start practicing this shift in consciousness, when you move from petition to recognition, from separation to oneness, from control to grace, your circumstances might actually get worse before they improve. This isn't failure. This isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong or that the practice doesn't work. It's the transition revealing everything false in your life so truth can replace it. Think about what happens when you stop maintaining illusions through force and control. Everything not built on spiritual truth begins to dismantle. The relationships held together by manipulation start falling apart. The financial structures built on anxiety and fear-based striving begin to collapse. The health patterns maintained by stress and resistance surface more visibly. Most people hit this point and immediately panic. They abandon the practice and return to begging God to fix the chaos, not understanding that consciousness is actually cleaning house. This transition period tests your commitment to truth over comfort, to spiritual reality over familiar appearances. It's asking whether you're willing to let everything false crumble so something real can emerge. The journey through this phase requires trust that's almost impossible to maintain without understanding what's actually happening behind the scenes. You're not being punished. You're not doing it wrong. You're experiencing the natural consequence of consciousness, shifting from false foundations to true foundations. And the old structures can't remain standing when the internal support system changes. Some people practice faithfully for months and watch their entire life seem to disintegrate. Marriages hit crisis point. Businesses start failing. Health declines. Every area that was held together by the old consciousness begins revealing its instability. The temptation to quit, to return to what's familiar even if it wasn't working, becomes overwhelming. But this is precisely where the real transformation begins to take root. Everything that needs to fall apart is being given permission to fall apart so you can rebuild from truth instead of continuing to build on false foundations. As you persist through this transition, as you refuse to abandon recognition even when appearances suggest total collapse, you begin moving towards something profound. You start becoming transparent to divine consciousness. This isn't about achieving some special spiritual status or becoming holier than other people. It's about becoming so established in Christ consciousness, so clear of personal agenda and ego-driven motivation, that divine consciousness can operate through you without obstruction. This is the same state Jesus demonstrated, and it's not reserved for ancient prophets or specially chosen people. It's available to you through persistent recognition of what's already true. You don't achieve transparency through effort or technique. You achieve it by continuously releasing everything false until only truth remains. And that process happens naturally as you practice presence consistently, day after day, choosing recognition over petition, choosing truth over comfortable illusions, choosing to trust the process even when everything seems to be falling apart. Type, "I'm staying faithful," if you're committing to this journey, even through the transition period. If you're still here with me, you've just taken a journey that most people will never experience because they're too comfortable staying inside the familiar cage of traditional religious thinking. What we've explored today isn't just information that sits in your mind and fades away by tomorrow. This is transformation waiting to happen in your life the moment you begin practicing what you now understand. This channel exists to bring you these hidden truths that have been buried under centuries of institutional control, to give you practical spiritual insights that actually work when you apply them. If this resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring the revelations that change everything about how you experience reality, go ahead and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover together, and I'm committed to bringing you content that shifts consciousness, not just fills time. Drop a comment right now saying, "This message was meant for me, so I know you made it all the way through." I read every single comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your commitment to this path publicly. It anchors the decision in your consciousness and lets me know these teachings are landing where they need to land. And if this video opened doors in your awareness that have been locked for years, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready for it, people who are tired of begging and ready to start recognizing. Individuals who sense there's something deeper than what religion has been teaching them. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into dissolving the blocks that keep you from experiencing what Jesus actually demonstrated. It picks up right where we're leaving off and shows you the practical steps for living from Christ consciousness instead of just understanding it intellectually. Click and continue with me over there, because what you've learned today is just the beginning of understanding how spiritual reality actually operates in your life.